and so it was written with a Southern English audience in mind, and not for a Scottish audience. And looking at the attendee list this evening, I'm seeing a lot of names of people who fly in Scotland and in the Highlands pretty regularly. So I'm conscious that at least some of what I'm talking about, if not much of it, will be perhaps somewhat teaching you to suck eggs, which I apologize. And because of that, I think what I'd like to do is to say from the outset that if anyone's got any questions throughout the presentation, please just type them in the comments. I probably won't be able to see them, but Mike, if you want to interrupt me at any point to sort of ask questions as they pop up, then we can perhaps sort of address people's questions as they come up, and make it pertinent in that way.
Okay.
I also just want to point out from the outset that I am an intermediate pilot, by no means one of the sort of top pilots in Scotland, and again, looking at the attendee list, I can already see quite a few people who I would consider to be much better pilots than me. So I just mentioned that from the beginning. I have put in already into the chat group a file called Warwick Kaye, Thames Valley presentation show notes, and in that there are links to quite a few of the things that either get referenced in this presentation. So please feel free to take that, download it, and refer to it at your leisure later on. Also, because Shemek's going to be talking after me, I'll rattle through this. It was intended to be, I think, an hour long, but I'll try and make it a bit shorter than that, so that to give Shemek time. So with that in mind, let us crack on. So I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully, Mike, you can just give me the nod that that's working. Okay, have you got a sort of a title screen there? Can't hear you, Mike. I'm going to assume that's a yes. So this is me in my backyard. I live. I'm very, very fortunate to live up near Bewley, just west of Inverness, and on the edge of what we consider to be one of the last wild areas in Europe. I don't like calling it wilderness for ecological reasons, but it's certainly a wild area. The population density between me and the west coast is less than one person per square kilometre, and it's significantly less than one person per square kilometre. It's really, really empty, beautiful mountainous terrain, and on a blue day like this, as Mike said, there's nowhere better in the world to fly, as far as I'm concerned. It comes with some challenges, which I'll talk about, and the opportunity to fly on days like this come relatively few and far between, but when they do come, it's absolutely magnificent. So that's flying between Glencannick and Glen Strathfara, heading towards the west coast. You can just make out the Coolin in the far distance there. That's the Coolin of Skye, if you can see the cursor. So yeah, I live on relatively close to the east coast, but it's in a narrow part of the Highlands, so you can fly to the west coast, as I've actually done with Shemek, relatively easily. Before we go any further, I just want to mention a couple of things. So the show notes I've already mentioned. As Mike mentioned, around about this time next year, April next year, 2022, me and Kieran Campbell are running a week-long guided paragliding residential trip, which is also intended to be for non-paragliding partners, because obviously we're aware of the fact that the weather might not play ball. So our idea is we're putting together a really, really cool small group Highland holiday, and if it's flyable, the pilots will go flying, and if it's not flyable, we'll all go off and do other cool activities. We're calling it a Highland Fling, and the details are in show notes. So if you think that that's something that appeals to you or anyone you know, please do me a favor and send it on. As mentioned, Ben and I are reviving at Scotia this year. We've got a great cadre of English and Scottish pilots already signed up to that. And the links to, we're just running it on Telegram, the links to that are in the show notes. And I have a YouTube channel called Highland Paraglider where I put some extremely amateur videos. But I still get very excited with every new follower that I get. So if you haven't followed it, please make my day and do so. But also something that I actually do care about quite a lot, given that my tourism business that I run, which is almost entirely set up for Americans, is completely dead in the water. I have a little holiday cottage.
I didn't mean to interrupt you. I can see you were camouflaged against the mat.
Oh yeah, I was just like, oh, bomb in the air.
Matt Wilkes, you're talking very loudly to everybody. Matt, could you could you mute, please? Yeah, so a little holiday cottage, which is just at my house. And if you fancy a holiday in the Highlands, then please book it or share it with your friends. And finally, I just want to give a really special thanks to Kieran Campbell. Most of the photographs in this presentation are Kieran's. I'm sure you're all aware of his amazing photography, which is regularly featured in Cross Country magazine and elsewhere. He's a friend, a great photographer, and also a fantastic pilot. So the aim of this presentation is to provide inspiration as the spring season seems just around the corner for flying in the Highlands, and also information. And I'm guessing, as I've already alluded to, that most of you don't really need the information, perhaps just a bit more of the sort of eye candy. So with that in mind, I'm going to gloss over this bit really quickly because this was really meant for the Thames Valley Club. But here is what I consider to be the Highlands, everything north of the Highland boundary fault line, and this rather more notional line to the east of which is obviously Aberdeenshire and isn't really considered part of the Highlands. And in my mind, I break the Highlands down for flying into some distinct areas. So we've got the Cairngorms, and the yellow stars represent places where there are lifts, where we can get a lift to launch. So that's Glenshee. The Cairngorms, as most of you know, is a plateau fundamentally. So when you see it from the air, a lot of it's quite flat, as you can see from this picture of Kieran's, and then it's deeply fissured by glacial valleys. It's pretty. I find the prospect of trying to cross the Cairngorms quite intimidating. There's major boonies in there, and also then I don't know if this is true, but my feeling for it is that the nature of the terrain is that it's finding thermals might not be as straightforward as it is in landscape where the terrain's a bit more pointy and it's obvious where the thermals are going to trigger. So yeah, I haven't done it yet. I haven't traversed the Cairngorms, but because it's a big circle, basically a big massif, it can take a wind in any direction. And there are good sites right around the periphery of the Cairngorms that, in particular, the Aberdeenshire Club, make really good use of, as well as some in the heart of the Cairngorms in places like Braemar and Glenshee and other places. Then we've got Nevis Range. The northernmost of those two stars is Anachmore, where there's a really good gondola high up to a north-facing launch. And then the chairlift at Glencoe as well, and then below that's the kind of Trossachs, right in the southwest corner of the Highlands. Absolutely stunning area. Most of you will recognise Buckle Etive Moor, the great sort of guardian to the entrance to Glencoe as it narrows off Rannochmore. And the launch is at the ski centre, and it can ping you. I mean, this Buccleuch Moor is really just one thermal away from launch, so you can get yourself into this incredible mountainous terrain very quickly. But also, it's facing out onto a relatively flat and broad glen, and then Rannochmore. So there's actually sort of almost like flatland flying to be had in front of the Glencoe launch as well. And on the right day, there's nowhere that's more magnificent, really. Then there's the area that I live next to. So my house is the Green Star, and this area that I refer to, or I think of in my mind, as the Six Glens. That's Glen Clooney, Glen Affric, Glen Canich, Glen Strathfara, Glen Orrin, and Strathconnan. And they are a series of glens running west to east. They have a lot of high mountains in amongst them. Carn A, which is the highest Munro north of the Great Glen, is in Glen Canich. And they have roads penetrating into them from the east, but most of those roads are dead ends, so they do not go, right through to the west coast. So about halfway across that red circle, the roads all run out, and you're then into, again, to pretty major boonies, fairly committing cross-country flying, but it's stunning terrain. And this is at the west end of Loch Mona, which is in Glen Strathfara. That was me on my Chile 4, photographed by Kieran on an absolutely fantastic spring day in 2018. And then there's the Torridon, West Coast and Skye area, which is, rightly famous for its phenomenal scenery, now extremely well traveled due to the NC 500, North Coast 500, but still just a remarkable part of the world on any day and under any circumstances, but it offers some really tremendous flying. This is, again, me on my Chile, flying from the red Cuillin with the black Cuillin in the background. So you've got the sort of more rounded red Cuillin in the foreground, and then the really sort of volcanic black Cuillin behind. Stunning landscape, and on the right day, just a beautiful place to be. So those are the sort of areas that I kind of think of. And then the Mona Lea, which is this kind of small chain of mountains, which I think are overlooked by a lot of people in terms of walking and climbing and those sorts of things. But they're worth a mention in particular because of Craig Meggie. No, hold on, Craig Meggie, yes. Just down in the west end here. It's a good launch there, and there's a great run that you can do up towards Aviemore, when you're always within glide of the road, which is quite nice. And back again. Tony Shepherd did a fantastic 100k out and return from Craig Meggie up beyond Aviemore and back again. I think averaging about 7,000 feet throughout the flight, about 2 years ago. So it's an area that's worth just sort of bearing in mind. There's often good flying to be had there. And I've just superimposed Tim Bridle's 170k record-breaking flight onto that to sort of show you the kind of scale. That was the longest flight within Scottish borders to date that Tim pulled off about 4 or 5 years ago, no, 4 years ago, something like that. Can't remember the exact date. So a couple of resources to mention. There's a really good ebook called Scottish Paragliding. I'm not sure many people actually know about it, but I've put a link in the show notes. Written by Cliff Smith and with fantastic photographs by Gary Williamson. A friend of mine actually printed it out for me and ring bound it, but you can just buy it as a PDF. and it's a really comprehensive site guide to the whole of Scotland. So if you haven't seen it, you do have to pay for it. It's not free, but it's excellent. I highly recommend it if you're interested in looking at sites in Scotland. And another place that I like looking is past years on the SHPF XC League, and you can just see where the best pilots have flown on any given day and the lines they've taken, and there's a hell of a lot of kind of information there that you can absorb if you're super keen to fly XC in the Highlands. So again, this is rather targeted to the English market, but I'm just talking about a typical Highlands site. Obviously we don't have managed sites in the way that they do. We just walk up a hill and find a flat place to lay out and go for it. And over time, people discover that certain spots seem to work quite well, and they become known as sort of sites, even if they're not necessarily recognizable as a launch site. Just talk a bit about access. I'm sure most of you know that one of the great benefits of living and flying in Scotland is our wonderful right to roam, which was formalised under the Scottish Outdoor Access Code in law a few years ago, which allows us to take non-vehicular access pretty much anywhere. I mean, there are obvious exceptions like military training grounds and prisons and people's gardens and things, but you can ride a horse, paddle a canoe, ride a bicycle, walk, camp, and fly a paraglider anywhere in rural Scotland, providing that you're not disrupting other people's legitimate businesses and activities. And therefore there is an emphasis in the Outdoor Access Code on responsible access. And I mean, basically that just means being sensible, following the countryside code, closing gates, not leaving litter, making sure you leave no trace behind, and all those sort of good things that I think we all know. And I find the paragliding community, generally speaking, to be full of really decent and responsible people. Although I have to say, I despair at the behaviour of increasing numbers of people within our countryside. Maybe I'm just getting older, but it does seem to be getting worse. But there are some sort of particular sensitivities which maybe aren't just common sense and are just worth mention. So some of the clubs have arranged special access arrangements with landowners. That includes, in some places, being allowed to take vehicles up tracks, up private tracks. The hang gliders in particular have done that, and they, rightly get pretty peeved if paragliders come along and kind of piss off gamekeepers or landowners through irresponsible behavior. At this time of year in particular, lambing is super sensitive. The farmers who keep sheep get really, really pissed off if you're disrupting or disturbing their sheep when they're heavily pregnant. And that's something you just have to be so careful about. Don't land in fields full of sheep or fly low over sheep at this time of year. And then from August onwards, there's the grouse shooting and the shooting of red stags in particular is quite sensitive. And there's various ways in which you can sort of deconflict with that. There's a system called hill phones on which the estates put where they're going to be shooting stags, and you can refer to that before you're planning on going out and trying to avoid that. Breeding birds is a particular sensitive topic around where I live. We've got a lot of golden eagles nesting just west of us, and we have good liaison with the local raptor study groups to make sure that we're not disturbing golden eagles or any other Schedule 1 bird. All the Schedule 1 birds, the the sort of rare raptors, golden eagles, white-tailed eagles, ospreys, red kites, etc. It's highly illegal to disrupt them at the nest site or cause them any disturbance. So it's just, again, something that's worth being aware of. And then the new pressure or concern is COVID-related stresses. And I think, up until about now, that's been people being concerned about COVID being spread. And so sort of high touch areas like gates and other access points have, people have been worried about, could that be a place where COVID could linger? And landowners, some with totally legitimate concerns and some just using it as an excuse to try and keep people off their land, have placed restrictions on access and all the rest of it. And I think we need to sort of find the right way forward with that. We need to protect our right to roam and push back where it's unreasonable behavior, but at the same time we need to be respectful of people's legitimate concerns. Moving forward, hopefully, touch wood, with the worst of COVID behind us, I think the concern in the Highlands, and I really feel it because I'm in the tourist industry myself, is of these little remote Highland communities, which are generally populated with elderly people, just feeling overburdened with the huge numbers of people that will inevitably come into the Highlands this year because people aren't able to go on foreign holidays and they're just desperate to get out of their houses. And, all of the sort of bad behavior that comes with that, the littering and the defecation in car parks and breaking of personal property and all that kind of stuff. I think we as a community just need to be aware that that's going on and that that is putting people on edge, and that the sensitivity level has been notched up considerably as a result of that. I can't offer advice about how to do that other than just to behave sensibly. But also I think, well, one bit of advice I would offer is that if you're trying to gain access somewhere and people are looking at you suspiciously, or they approach you in a sort of perhaps angry manner, just talk to them. I have been confronted a few times, and I've almost every single time found that if I just go forward, talk to the person in a calm, respectful and sensible manner, 99% of the time that diffuses any concerns that they have, and more often than not they'll end up helping you. I mean, I've had lifts from people who I've initially thought were going to be super angry farmers. Has been really surprising. So that's just something to be aware of with regards to access. But I think the key thing on this slide is to contact the local clubs and pilots, because of course they're the ones who know what the local sensitivities are, and they're right up to date with what, with an evolving situation, especially with regards to COVID. So that's all a bit heavy, but I think it's worth mentioning. I've put the websites and Telegram groups, most of you are already on them, in the show notes. So obviously, if we're going to access these amazing sites, we need to be able to walk. As you saw, there are only 3 places in the Highlands, as far as I'm aware, that you can get a lift to launch. So you're going to need to be able to walk to fly in the Highlands, and not just to launch. Here's Neil Rawlings, practically on his hands and knees going up a pretty steep slope in Ascent. And sometimes the slope's a bit more benign, but the heather's hard work. This is Shemek, who's coming next, standing in the snow above Loch Morlich. The good news is that when we get to launch, often we're able to find these great spots to lay out on, and it can be just like a sort of like Annecy, like a sort of Scottish Annecy, beautiful, short, grassy layout. Sometimes it's not, of course. Sometimes we have rank heather and rocks, and it is worth, if you're doing your ground handling practice, it's worth practicing just at a gentle lift of the wing. Sometimes I see particularly foreign pilots and newbies seeming to think that they have to sort of snatch their wing into the air. And if you've got it hooked on heather or around a rock, you're likely to either spin the wing or ping a line, as I've done myself a number of times. So I think these days I just build a wall and just gently tease the wing into the air if it's on heather. That's a good technique. There's a lovely launch at the top of Marusk with the hills of Torridon in the background. But also the other place you might end up walking is on landing, especially if you're going to commit over the boonies. This was so the little video that I showed you of the Bluebird Day at the very beginning. I was flying to the west coast and I hit the sea breeze and landed about 20k short. And in this very, very remote glen, which fortunately did have a track, but it was about 30 degrees that day. It was so hot. And I walked and walked and walked. I can't remember how many hours I walked. And eventually, extraordinarily, I found a road gang who were retarring this road, believe it or not. And it was in Sheikh Mohammed's estate. So he was obviously throwing huge amounts of money at getting his little remote Highland road retarred. And the guy who had just tipped the tar in his big tipper truck, I ran and banged on his door and I basically begged him to take me to Dorney, which he did slightly reluctantly, but he did take me to Dorney. So yeah, we will, if we're going to commit over the back of the Highlands, chances are it will end up in the boonies. And so you do definitely need an Inreach or a spot. I'm going to leave all of that to Shemek. You need to know where you are and how to get to where you're going. So mapping software is important, bearing in mind that in a place like this, you will not have data or even probably any reception on your phone. So like pre-downloading maps into something like View Ranger, for example, is extremely worthwhile. Good boots and poles, and I'm sure, as you all know, our stream water is the best in the world, but the beer is better. And when I did finally get to Dorney that day, I enjoyed an amazing pint before getting the bus back to Drumnadrochit. I got a local bus back to Drumnadrochit, expecting it to be about £2.75. It cost me 32 quid. Bloody stagecoach, I couldn't believe it. Anyway, that's another story. A midge net anytime after May is a really good addition to your kit. I take a net rather than midge spray because it's more effective. Like that's 100% effective at keeping midges off your face. It's lighter than carrying a liquid, and also any midge repellent that's got DEET in it will corrode your gear. It will actually eat your gear. So I'm a big fan of the midge net. So you all know about midges, I don't need to talk about those. But ticks are actually a bigger problem. And if any of you have not spent much time in the Highlands, definitely educate yourself about ticks and about Lyme disease. It's an increasing problem and potentially very serious. At its worst, it's a fatal disease. So it's really worthwhile knowing how to avoid being bitten by ticks, but also knowing what the symptoms of Lyme are. So let's talk about times of year. Snow cover in early spring can be an issue. This is taken on the 15th of February, but then this was taken 10 days previously on another year. And as you can see, there's only a dusting of snow even here. This is at 2,500 feet at the summit of a Corbett, just a few miles from my house. Walked up with Tony Gotch and had a beautiful fly down at dawn. So the snow cover obviously rather depends on the on what kind of winter it is. And I've often wondered, I've been wondering to myself over the last few years, when does the kind of spring season begin? You know, when is it possible to fly cross country in Scotland? And the earliest I've achieved was actually this year on the 1st of March, this month. Myself and Neil Rawlings and went to Glentorridon, and obviously there was only 2 of us there, but remarkably Julio Lopez turned up the same site on the same day. Just an amazing coincidence. And we took off. I mean, the sky looked quite good, and I was sort of vaguely optimistic that we might get a therm and, you know, sort of boat about a bit. But when we launched, we were like, well, hey, it's on. And transitioned from Ben Alligan straight across onto Leargach, where we were hitting sort of, you know, because Leargach's got this amazing south-facing slope, which is all rocky, so it's pretty sort of thermic central, hitting 4 up therms. Base was quite low, so when we were crossing here, we were actually at base. It was actually in a bit of cloud suck, and then on to Ben A, and then it's no longer Torridonian sandstone, it's Cambrian quartzite, which is much more pale, as you can see. And it was harder to find the therms on there. I think the whiteness of the rocks reduced the amount of thermic activity. But we managed to get high again, having thought we were going to bomb out, transitioned back over onto Leargach. By this point, we were sort of flying a little bit more efficiently, having been messing about initially, just like climb and then glide, climb and glide. Right back along to the end of Leargach, which is just stunning in the winter. And took a nice climb off the end there, and then back over onto Ben Alligan, by which point I was absolutely frozen to the core and busting for a pee. So I landed, top landed, but Neil went and did the whole out and return again, and then doubled back again and ended up landing in Kinloch. So he did a 50k XC that day on the 1st of March, which was just such a bonus after the winter we've just had. So yeah, you know, from any time this month, we could be looking for spring conditions, and spring is, you know, spring is king, really, as far as I'm concerned. That's when we get our epic conditions. This is also Ben A. That's Ben A there. You can see those pale slopes. This was an incredible day in 2008 where Julian Robinson flew a 100k triangle, and myself and Kieran flew 70 odd K, and there was a bunch of other pilots out that day. There's Leargach and there's Ben Alligan, which we launched from on the 1st of March this year. As you can see, base was very high. I mean, those 3,000 foot hills, so base was at 6,500 feet, I think. But we were when we were further inland, it was higher. I think we were flying at 7,000 feet that day. So April and May, I think, are the sort of, you know, the super cool months in the Highlands. We get these kind of prolonged spells of reasonably good weather, and often offering, you know, more than one day of good cross-country flying concurrently, which is pretty rare otherwise. It's also pre-mid, which is a bonus. But it does always come with the, you know, the perennial spring health warning. Spring conditions can be freaking strong, and the thermals can be very sharp edged. We all lack currency, more so now than, you know, perhaps ever before, and so we just need to be very cautious. I mean, again, this photograph of Kieran's was taken on the same day, a little bit earlier. You can see there's Leargach, there's Ben A, and there's Ben Alligan there, but and that's Khaled. It's Khaled from the Aberdeen club in the foreground. I remember Kieran said to me afterwards with a sort of wry smile on his face, he said, yeah, I had to put my camera down and grab the brakes after I got spat out the side of a cloud with my wing folded in half, having been going at 5 up in a straight line, trying to get a photograph. So it was a strong day, and rough at times, but epic though. It was so epic. Then we get into early summer, June and July, generally, you know, also some very good days, although perhaps a little bit more interspersed, generally more mellow, although you can still get strong days. but midges are very much in force by that time of year and remain so until October, really, or the first frost. I think August is the worst month of the year in the Highlands for all sorts of reasons. I've got a kind of prejudice against August for wildlife guiding reasons, which is my business. But it's also just, I just don't like the weather. It's either humid and kind of sticky and minging, or it's just rainy and horrible. This was taken on the West Coast 2 years ago, I think. So I'm not a fan of August. But then we get into lovely, from mid-September onwards, it can be beautiful again, and we get that time of change and cool. There's a certain element of spring-like conditions about it. Again, you get these cool days, but still quite bright sunshine, and it can get quite springy again. Certainly get some great cross-country flying in September and even in October. So this was the 16th of October last year. Myself and Kieran went over to Skye for a couple of days, took our tents, and just beautiful, magnificent scenery, and it was just a great place to be, even if we hadn't flown. But we did fly. This was taken from launch, looking back. This is on Ben Kailich, looking back towards the Black Coolan. And we took off, and we weren't expecting much. There was a little bit of thermic behavior, but mostly just sort of soaring about and scratching. And then we top landed here, and 2 sea eagles flew along the slope below us, and we could see right out over towards the Hebrides to the west. And it was just lovely. And then it was like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We'd had our lunch, chilled out, had a chat. 3 o'clock in the afternoon, took off and had a 3-up thermal to base, and went on a sort of mini cross-country, 15K cross-country as a result of it. So that was in the mid-October. And then a thing that we in the Highland Club have done a bit of over the last few years, which has really been fun, is what we call the dawn raid in winter. So the idea is to get up out of bed in the dark, walk up the hill in the dark, and then time it to arrive on launch just as at dawn. And you often get these really beautiful sunrises. And then it's just a fly down. But I mean, the thing is, in December, January, dawn is at like 10 o'clock in the morning. So it's not getting out of bed at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. It's sort of, out of bed at 7, walk up the hill, dawn, fly back down, and get on with the day. And I just thought I'd show a couple of quick little videos on that. Of that activity, because we've done a few, some of them have been pretty epic. So this was again in Torridon, 21st of February, it's about 3 years ago now. Myself, Tony Gotch, Adrian Howe, and Sebastian Ryder walked up Ben A in the dark in time to be on launch for dawn, and expected a fly down, but it turned out to be something a little bit more special. I'm cutting these slightly short because I'm conscious that I've already taken up 45 minutes. This was, in my opinion, even better, walking up to Sulven. So we canoed in along Loch Riati, which is this long loch here, camped overnight. This was on the 1st of January, 2018, I think it was, 1st of January, yeah. So with a bit of a hangover, camped here, walked up Sulven, and then flew down. It was me and Phil.
I've just landed down by the river.
So yeah, that was a fantastic day. I'm conscious that I've overrun on time. Why can't I? So just I'm going to prattle through the rest of it pretty quickly. So weather, yeah, I think you guys all know this. And I'm sure we've all got different ways of approaching looking at the forecast. I tend to look at XC weather for the next week or so, as well as lazy rasp. And then once I've sort of honed in on a potentially flyable day, I'm checking the wind altitude in particular, something I'm very interested in, and the skew T from SkySight. And then, having sort of considered all my options, I generally go where everyone else is going anyway. Tony Shepherd once remarked that flying in the Highlands is a bit like flatland flying with hills below you, in that we don't really have valley winds in the same way that you do in the Alps, for example. And yes, we do have sea breeze, and it does come in and can kill therms and create convergence, and that's something you need to be aware of, but it's not a valley wind system in the way that the Alps creates. I think the things that we do need to be concerned about in the Highlands are overdevelopment, but mostly just Met wind related hazards. So, is it going to be blown out on launch, or is there a risk of getting blown back over the terrain and into rotor? I think those are the things that I'm very scared of, and we all should be. And increasingly, as I find that I don't want to fly in strong wind conditions in the Highlands. I mentioned Tony Shepherd there. He's done a really good talk on cross-country flying in Scotland, which is on my YouTube channel. It's an hour long. It's full of amazing insights from a really great pilot. So I recommend it. I think for visiting pilots, my best advice in terms of the weather would be come prepared to do something else. So if you're going to come to the Highlands, come prepared to, go hill walking. It's an amazing place to climb Munros, even on non-flyable days. Go wild swimming, make the most of our right to roam. Go canoeing, fishing. When my paragliding helmet's not being used for paragliding, I'm sometimes on a trials bike. But hope for a really good day. And they do come along, and then you might find yourself wingtip to wingtip with a golden eagle, as Greg Callum did in Glencarrick a couple of years ago. So the locals are friendly and they're here to help. And yeah, just to point, I'll just reiterate the thing about contacting the local clubs and the local pilots, and they'll always help you, and they'll also steer you clear of any kind of pitfalls that might be in the area. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you. I mean, Mike, if you think it's appropriate, I could take a couple of questions, but you may just want to crack on with Przemek. I'll leave you with a bit of footage that I took, ironically enough, in August last year, between the lockdowns, flying over the Fanichs, which is that little range there, which I'd never flown over before, and it was just a super special day. Flew a nice 50K XC, which was my best flight last year. But Mike, we can talk while this is playing. So do you want to
Warwick,
open up for questions?
Yeah, no, that'd be great. If anyone's got any questions, maybe put them in the chat initially. Once Warwick has stopped screen sharing, then we can see if anyone's got their hand up or whatever. But any questions out there?
Okay, now I get.
What do you do if you're flying? What do you do with it if you're flying with an eagle, Warwick?
Well, enjoy it. Occasionally they, will come and thermal with us, and that's totally cool. The only time I would be concerned about flying with an eagle would be if you were down close to the terrain and you were in eagle nesting territory, and and if the eagle looked distressed or angry, then fly away from it, because that would constitute probably disturbance. And it's just ethically not a good thing to do, but it's probably also illegal. And there are people who dedicate their entire lives to monitoring eagle nesting sites. So if you're pissing an eagle off close to its nest, there's a fairly good chance it's going to get observed. I had an amazing experience in the Alps 2 summers ago, thermaling with a golden eagle, and then another golden eagle came and joined it, and it had a hair in its talons. Just extraordinary. So that was, as a wildlife enthusiast, that was a really amazing thing to experience.
Ben Wiley has asked about the sensitivity of Category 1 birds for cross-country paramotor flights.
Well, I mean, what the law says is that it's illegal to disrupt birds at their nest, at a nest site. And I mean, that's sort of generally extended, to within eyesight of their nest site. So again, providing you're not buzzing the birds when they're clearly low down. I mean, golden eagles, they don't come down to the terrain. Oh gosh, we could get into a natural history lesson here, but golden eagles like to fly high. So if you're seeing a golden eagle low, it's probably either hunting or close to its nest. So I'd fly away from it. But again, I mean, so in my area, I can provide grid references for places where it's like considered very sensitive, and other people might be able to do the same in other areas. So it'd be worth just perhaps trying to get that information. But once you're up high and traveling, you know, if you encounter a golden eagle, it's only going to be a fleeting encounter, especially on a paramotor. I don't think a golden eagle is going to approach you, so I wouldn't worry about it too much.
I found that they approach you on landing when you've shut your engine off, but as soon as you put that engine on, then they get pretty far away from you pretty fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you been? How are you getting on with your Monroe challenge?
Well, I mean, obviously, current restrictions. I live next to Glasgow Airport, so I'm a bit restricted. I've done 191 of 282 of them.
Yeah.
So, but I plan to do the rest of them. Well, I'm in Spain at the moment, so I might be here for another 2 months. But yeah, I plan to do the rest of them as soon as I come back, along with hopefully a 500-kilometer triangle in Scotland, which should be a first. So I'm planning for that. That. But I need to lose weight, which is proving very hard with the rate of beer drinking that's going on. So
I know the feeling.
yeah.
Warwick, just maybe just a brief comment on the Highland no-fly zone, the military activity, and
Yeah, so the Highland restricted area, it got deactivated about 4 years ago, so it's not a concern anymore. I think there are probably two schools of thoughts about NOTAMs up here. I'm in the school of thought that says that by the time the NOTAM that you put in the morning has actually kicked in, the chances are you've either bombed out or flown away from the area that you've NOTAMed, and so it's of dubious benefit. We do need to be aware of some of the military exercises that take place, like whatever it's called, Warrior, can't remember its name now, and one or two others. But yeah, we don't, you know, there's a few airspaces, there's a couple of firing ranges, and obviously there's Inverness Airport, there's Aberdeen Airport, but on the whole, we're very, very fortunate in the Highlands to have very, very little airspace compared to England and other places. And but there are military airplanes up here, and in fact, myself and Neil were just soaring a site about 2 weeks ago when two Herculeses flew behind us and then circled around and flew up the glen in front of us. They never got close enough that we were very concerned, but they certainly had our attention, let's put it that way.
brilliant. So, well, any other last call for any other questions to Warwick?
I think, thank you all. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mike. I think we should hand over to Shemek.
Okay, well, Warwick, many thanks indeed from everyone. And if you're inspired to go fly in the Highlands and you haven't yet done so, what better starting point than Warwick's Highland Fling next year, guided holidays with Warwick. Go for it.
Yeah, with Kieran, really, he'll be the guide in the air, but I'll do the logistics and the accommodation and the rest of it. Yeah, guys, thank you. Hope to see you all on a hill very soon.
Thanks, Warwick. Okay, one of the attractions of the Highlands is the remoteness, and as most of us end up flying in solitude, a tracking device these days is a crucial safety device, as Warwick pointed out. So Shemek has gone deep into track and trace, but these are systems that work. Shemek's been paragliding since 2012, having moved over originally from gliding, I think. And he's flown around 500 hours in Scotland and the Alps. Most of that 500 hours has been up, down, and along at Dungavel. And for those of you who don't know Dungavel, Dungavel is a wee pimple south of the Central Belt. He's also recently developed a love of flying and hiking in leggings. In fact, he's probably wearing leggings now. But anyway, take it away, Shemek.
Thanks, Mike. Just for anyone concerned, I'm not wearing leggings now. It's just skinny jeans. Yeah. Yeah, and thanks for the presentation work. That was amazing. And yeah, for anyone considering going to the Highland Fling, I have tasted Warwick's hospitality. It's tip top. Very much recommend it. So yeah, great place to go. Right. Can everyone see this? My slides. Cool. Right. Yeah, Mike asked me to have a bit of a chat about the satellite trackers, which is something I've been using for actually quite a while, since my first proper season, as I'll discuss in a moment. But I think I haven't actually met quite a few people on this chat, so I thought we could maybe start with a quick survey actually. So if you can either QR code this on your phone or just go to menti.com and use the code 784639. Got it. Yeah, and there's 2 questions. So let's see how many people actually have got trackers and all that.
God, this is impressive tech, Shemek.
It's only downhill from here, I'm afraid. But yeah. Interesting. Okay, so there's quite a few people here who do have trackers actually. Oh, I got 45 participants. Fair enough. So we got half of you. Is no one flying with spots these days?
Tim says he's got a spot, but he couldn't vote.
Oh, right. Okay.
Stephen Holsworth is wondering where's the option for track by vaccine.
Yeah, the NHS tracker. I'll give it another half a minute. Got more than half of people now on. Right. Okay, so we got 25 responses. 2/3 of us got an Inreach, so about 15 people. Yeah, I know there's some people who a few people have spots as well. But that's yeah, that's interesting. Most people, at least who are kind of keen enough to attend the club nights and things, have the trackers. That's great. And the next slide, I think you should get the question now. Has anyone actually used it? Like in a real situation, landing out. Count. Great. Everyone's flying safe. All right. So we got almost as many people as the first one. So actually, well, if anyone actually has used it and maybe can't put it here, can you put it on the chat and we can discuss it later, because it might be quite. Oh, who's the yes? If you don't mind revealing yourself.
Have you seen Tim's question in the chat or comment on the chat?
Yeah, where's the chat? Yes, I'm going to actually talk about it, Tim. So, but you haven't. I guess you haven't had a spot yourself. No, fair enough. Okay, cool. That's good to know. Right. So I guess most of us do have something nowadays, which is great. Right. Let's go back to this presentation then. Right. So very quickly. I'm going to have a very quick chat on why do we need trackers? And, do we need trackers, or who needs them? What is available out there? I mean, most people, I think, know that, but I know that some people still kind of obsess and think, what to get, what not to get, should we change? So I'll very quickly chat through what's out there at the moment and what the kind of main features and main differences are. And then we'll have a quick discussion on how not to use them, how to use them. I am probably not that experienced with massive search and rescue operations like you might have read about Gavin McClurg's operations with his spots and Inreaches and things like that. But I'll talk through how I do it, and I think so far I've had a reasonably good record on not missing out things. So if it's in any example. So firstly, why? And my first reason why is because of Ben, who's actually with us here today. So a very, very quick story. When I was probably a few months past CP, I got taken up north to Loch Cluny by Brendan, and Ben and Seb came along. We were all kind of quite novice pilots. Ben had probably the most hours out of three of us newbies, and there were all these guys like Jules and Matt Church, and they're all flying their fancy schmancy two-liners and wearing orange spots. And I remember like on takeoff looking at these guys thinking like, well, that's pretty cool. One day I might go XC. Maybe I'll get myself something like that. It'll be a cool gizmo, like nice thing to do. And then we had a little chit chat on a takeoff, and one thing we agreed basically is not to fly from Cluny towards Glenafric, because it's a bit of a boony land and hard to get out, hard to walk out, and all that. Which is exactly what Ben did straight after. He just went out, climbed out, got a thermal. And disappeared into Glenafric. And 5 or 6 hours later, we were literally minutes away from phoning Mountain Rescue, because it was dark. It was getting about 8 or 9 p.m., I think. And just about when we were kind of, pushing the button on it, Ben called. It turned out that he, bombed out near Lohafric, walked out to the car park, which was totally dead by that time, but he just happened to, it's a bit like Warwick, I guess, just, total chance. He just happened to come across a family who was actually lost and took the wrong turn off or something like that. So they were there totally by accident as well. And they gave him a lift out. And for those who haven't been to Lohafric car park, that is a solid, 30-minute drive from where you can actually get phone signal. So he would have been for a serious walk. and we would have definitely, have called mountain rescue if it wasn't for that. So because of Ben, when we came back from that weekend, the first thing I did when I got home was actually I bought myself a spot, even though I haven't, maybe I've done one XC that weekend, which is like 12K or something. But I thought, you know what, if I'm gonna be going out with these guys, I'll definitely do a Ben at some point. So, and it doesn't take a long time to call mountain rescue or something like that. Another reason, which is I think the key reason for everyone else, obviously, is walking out with an injury is not great. And again, people might think it's not that common. We don't maybe live in kind of boony country like Gavin McClurg and things like that. It actually, some of the older pilots will remember and maybe correct me later. But I believe there was a guy who broke a leg on takeoff at Bergerman, and because of kind of poor communications, maybe he wasn't with the group, everyone left, and he spent some serious amount of time with a very badly broken leg, which was apparently almost broken off, and then he had to crawl down with that leg to get help, which I'm pretty sure wasn't very cool. I believe he dropped paragliding after that, from what I've heard. But it's a remote possibility, but it does happen, and it happened in the Highlands already. So who knows? Another good reason for me is, I kind of touch wood, never done anything too stupid to myself, but I did take part in a couple of rescues. Well, at least 2 of them involved helicopter. And actually, both of them were in places where we had decent phone reception. But personally, if I'm spending all the money every month and every year for all the subscription, if that is to help someone else as well, not necessarily me, that is money well spent. So, I'm more than happy to think about it that way. It's not just for myself. There might be someone else who needs help too. And last but maybe not least, kind of gives your family a peace of mind. Like, I like to think that my wife is a bit calmer when she knows that I landed safely or something. Possibly she doesn't actually care at all, but I like to think that she does. So there you go. And another thing, which is actually what I mentioned a second ago with Tim, is when you're sitting at work, you can watch your buddies as an XC finds. For people who don't know what XC find is, I'll show it in a moment. But it's kind of half a joke here, but actually people do look what are other pilots doing when they're flying on a good epic day, because it's just a thing that you do. And as Tim mentioned, when he had his reserve throw, Al Bowman kind of spotted that something's a bit unusual with Tim's track log within half an hour, I think. So it definitely works, especially on a good day. Last but not least, if you ever want to be flying buddies with Gavin, you have to have an Inreach. I think he said he would not fly with anyone who doesn't have an Inreach or something like that. So there you go. And so it's a bit of a joke, but as Warwick said, if you're flying in these boonies, it's kind of silly not to have it almost in some ways. It definitely would help your friends to know what you're doing. Because again, as Warwick mentioned, it only takes 15-20 minutes in some places, and you are easily more than a day away from walking out, especially it's kind of quite deep with no roads, etc. I think to kind of summarize, why would you need it? If you're a weekend pilot that always flies with a buddy, never flies on their own, and you only kind of storm Dungavel and Tinto and Abington, you're never outside any of mobile range, you're probably fine. But it doesn't take a lot in Scotland to be quite far away, and it's a good idea, I think, to have. Personally, I had it for a long time, never used it, but never had any second thoughts about it. So again, second one is maybe for people who really haven't got into it very much. I'm going to talk only about the satellite trackers. So that's the Spot and Inreach really. There's some other trackers in the market. So I think a few years ago, people started coming out with satellite messengers. So these are small satellite connection boxes that you can pair with your phone with Bluetooth. So you can basically text from any place in the world where you don't have mobile reception. You can text via satellite. So this is kind of quite nice if you go for a hike, but they're not trackers. So you can send a message if you need to, but these things won't send your track log, won't show where you are, even if you're unconscious or something. So that's not really that useful for us. There are also some other trackers like LifeTrack, which are GSM based, so they use mobile network. Again, they're just not very useful in Scotland. And I know some people were also quite keen on using the EPIRBs or EPIRBs, whatever you pronounce it. These are the emergency beacons that, in emergency, you hit a button and it emits a satellite signal and a radio signal, which is primarily used in kind of marine environment. I believe, I haven't researched it so much, but I believe there were some questions about the accuracy of signal, location signal for these devices in the past, at least. But most importantly, it's not a tracker again. It's all fine and well if you run into trouble and decide to use it, but if you smack your head and lie unconscious, there's no one to press the help button for you. So it's not really that useful. So we're going to only talk about the satellite trackers. And again, most people probably know what these things are, but just to explain quickly what these trackers actually do. The number one thing is they send location fixes. So once you turn it on and then hit a button so they start tracking, they will send out a signal every 5 or 10 or 20 minutes, depending how you set it up, via a satellite, and then that signal gets sent somewhere else. It can get sent to a website. It gets sent to somewhere where it can be used by others. One place where I think pretty much all Scottish pilots put their track logs and make it available to be seen on the website is the XC Find. So again, going back to kind of Tim's example, people do really look at it. On a good day, especially if they can't get out flying, they will look what other what their buddies are doing. And I would say, with nothing else, this is number one kind of security assurance. Really, someone else knows where you are, and they can see whether you have moved or not in the last whatever interval you have set up. So this is the kind of the minimum, and that's what actually gives us the security of people knowing where we are. All of them can also send messages. At the very least, you can send, "I'm going to have an adventure, I'm okay, and I need help." The preset messages, you can set it depending on the device, but they usually go out to a couple of phone numbers, so you can text them. Like if you send them, they will be sent as texts or emails. And there's also the SOS message, which is the emergency message. If you were to hit that actually, I think that sends a text as well, but most importantly, that gets sent to some sort of operational headquarters for Spot or Garmin Inreach. And that's where someone who's actually paid to watch out for these SOS messages will pick it up. They will see where you are. They will maybe quickly check that's not just a false alarm, and they will then straight away phone the local search and rescue authority, or I guess it'll be police in the UK. That even if your buddies are all asleep or something like that, that will be picked up by someone, the SOS message. And some of these devices, as I'll show in a moment, they also have some additional extras like a compass or a map, but most of them are not really that useful apart from one. I think at the moment, as far as I know, there's only 2 suppliers that anyone would seriously consider. And it's Spot and Garmin, who bought Inreach. Inreach used to be a DeLorme brand, but Garmin bought them maybe 4 or 5 years ago. The key difference between them, I would say, is a little bit of pricing scheme, but also the coverage. They use different satellite networks, and Spot has a slightly spottier, to excuse the pun, coverage, whereas Garmin uses a slightly denser satellite network, so they've got 100% of Earth covered. In practice, I think for us, where most of us would ever fly, even if we go for foreign holidays, Spot will still be totally fine, I think. And I used to have Spot for maybe 4 or 5 years. I've had 1 or 2 missed messages in the whole time. It never seemed to have any big issues. And if you're an adventurer that actually needs whole world coverage, then you should probably research it better anyway, rather than listen to me. So the coverage thing doesn't really seem to be a massive issue. Now, we can choose from if you decide to buy one or change it. Both companies make a small, kind of a mini model, which is a little bit smaller than a package of cigarettes, and a slightly larger model, which is the size of a mobile, basically. Now, they do slightly different things. All of them give you tracking, which is the main thing again, and all of them will let you send out an SOS message or a "help me, I'm not dying, but I need help" message, plus maybe a custom message. Some of them, like the SpotX and both Inreaches, you can also text directly from the phone, so you can actually not just have your custom preset messages, but you can actually text your wife rather than just "I've just landed." You can text her, "Can you also I don't know, put the dinner on," or something like that. Yeah, they have a little bit more. Someone's unmuted. Whoever's unmuted, can you mute? And then the last, which is a bit of a special feature for the Inreach Explorer, it's also got moving map. It's basically like a Garmin GPS. So again, if you don't have something like that on your phone, that's maybe a nice feature to have for times like when Warwick says you land in the boonies and you kind of need to find a map or the way to get home. But they're all nice features, but how useful they are, actually, we can talk in a second. So I think that kind of the crux of that presentation, what I thought is actually most important, is to actually talk about how to use them and how not to use them. Because it's quite encouraging to actually see that majority of us have trackers now. I think when I bought my Spot, 9 years ago or something, it was literally like, I don't know, 10 people in Scotland who used them, if that. It was something quite unusual to have. Nowadays, most people have them. You can see on XT-Fine actually how many pilots there are registered, which is really good. But still every now and then I would see some people, some of my buddies as well actually, maybe having a tracker but not turning it on, or things like that, which is it's all personal choice and all that. But I guess just having it is doesn't really matter if you don't use it properly. And if you turn it on, it's good, because I guess if something really, really happens, you could probably still ask Garmin for them to ping and check where that person actually is, even if they don't start tracking or something like that. But again, it's not ideal. Like that's not the point where you're spending all the money every month to to not to be seen. So like to me, number one thing about having a tracker is actually take some time and learn how to use your device. There's like with instruments and everything else, there's so much that people just kind of go on a hill and all of a sudden they don't know how to turn it on, how to send a message or something like that. And it's not like they just bought it, that was lying in a cupboard for a month and they just didn't bother to look at the manual or something like that. And I think if you can use your device, that is probably 90% of success already, and you're much safer that way if something was to happen. But also what helps is to have a system. So not only just have a device and then, always think, oh, I should turn it on now, I should start tracking it now. Have a system and, make it part of your pre-flight and then always stick to it. That's the next thing. So going a little bit deeper into that, number one is, again, understand how to use it. When the time comes, and the time comes might be, I don't know, you have a really, really long walkout and you could do with a lift, but you're nowhere near a phone signal. You might not be able to text your wife or your mates because you don't know how to text a non-standard message or something like that, or haven't got context in it. So yeah, think about it ahead. We spend a lot of time sitting on the hills rather than flying. So, think about it, take some time, test all this messaging with your buddies. Once you've done it once or twice, it's quite obvious, it's quite easy. But at least to me, in my experience, these devices are not really that intuitive as your mobile phone, for example, where, you can kind of figure out how things work on a mobile phone if you click enough. These things have their idiosyncrasies. So it's worth trying it out first before you actually need to use it in anger. And as I said, like, have your numbers and contacts stored in these devices. So Inreach actually has a storage for mobile numbers and emails that you will need if you want to text someone from it. So make sure that you've got all that set up ahead of getting out. And last but not least, at least for the devices that you can connect to your phone and text using these devices, make sure you definitely know how to connect it to your phone. Don't, again, leave it to the last moment. And I think the most importantly is have a system and, really stick to it. So the advantage of it is that if you sometimes turn on your tracking when you're flying, if you sometimes ping a message, I'm about to take off, every now and then you will text your buddies that I've landed, but you kind of do it every now and then, not all the time. It will be a bit random. And then one day when you actually do break a leg or maybe knock yourself out unconscious, people might just think like, oh, he's just probably forgot to send that landed safely message or something like that. I hope people will not be that lax, but if someone always pings you got landed safely message, then not having a message like that from a pilot will be quite out of character. So that will definitely prompt some phone calls. I've done it myself a few times, calling my buddies to see why they haven't pinged a landing message yet. And yeah, sometimes they just forget. Sometimes they might have been flying longer than what we thought. But it definitely works. Again, Tim's example, he's been found by Alistair, who wasn't even like pinged or anything by the phone. So basically with your system, make it obvious that you're about to go flying. Make sure that you are visible to others. Having tracking is all fine and well, But if you don't sign up to something like XCFind, then really the only people that will know about where you are and how to see your track will be probably your buddies who just got your text, who might or might not check your track. They might or might not be bothered to check it often enough. If you're on XCFind and you're visible to everyone in Scotland, someone will be looking at you. I can guarantee you. I mean, I look at it at work a lot. So yes, someone will be definitely looking at it. And yeah, when you land it, always ping a safe message to just show people that you're definitely fine. And yeah, as I said before, just stick to your system. That you'll make it a little bit unusual for people looking at your track that, you know, something's a bit out of character. So just for an example, you know, my system is I send text to 5 people and also a couple of emails to the same group. So out of these 5 people, I know at any given time, there'll be at least 2 who will actually read that text because they're not at work, they're not asleep or something like that. So I know that there's at least one person who knows I actually went out to do something silly. Another rule I follow is that, you know, even if I'm gonna do something like a 60-second fly down from anywhere, I will just put it on. I will always ping, I'm about to take off, and I will always ping, I've landed safely. Again, it's just about this kind of system and people expecting that if you do something, you always do the same thing. I'm visible, I'm like XCFind, and I don't really turn off my visibility on it. And again, I just I probably missed a couple of times. I've missed sending all these messages, but I generally treat turning on my Inreach, turning on the tracking, and sending the takeoff and landed messages as a part of a pre-flight and a post-flight. It's just what you always do when flying. It's like, you know, like checking your instruments or checking your wing, basically. And yeah, just for interest, like that's what my messages look like. You know, they don't have to be, it doesn't have to be a very smart system, and maybe someone will have a slightly different system. There's probably different kind of logics to, you know, maybe not everyone wants to send I'm about to take off message, they just tracking or something like that. But, you know, as long as you have some system that people will know that you're about to do something silly, and then they can see you, even if you knock yourself unconscious, I guess that's what, you know, guarantees your safety. You know, my message is just like, I'm about to take off, I've landed, and my custom message is that I might need help, but it's not a life or death situation, but maybe I would like someone to come and pick me up. You know, if I don't want to call mountain rescue for, you know, a sprained ankle or something like that, but I would maybe want Steve to come and pick me up in his car. I've also got a link to XCFind. So again, people don't have then try to think about, oh, where's this website? Like my wife would not remember where the website with the tracking is, but if they have a link, they can just click on it and go straight to it. Right, so I think to summarize, you know, I don't think we all need trackers. There's definitely some pilots who, you know, just it's not their game to go into silly places where you're out of mobile reception and you know, half a day walk out from a road, which is fair enough, and they probably don't really need trackers, to be honest. But you're kind of, you know, going with what Warwick actually said as well. You know, if you ever fly in any place that's you know, at the very least can save getting a mountain rescue team out, it's probably worth considering getting one. You know, if you've flown in a place once, as you've seen on Warwick's photos, you will want to go back there more and more. So it's definitely going to happen again. So you'll definitely want it. There's a few trackers to choose from. They cost slightly different money. The plans, they're between start from about 10 quid a month. I think the Inreach is about 15 quid a month at the moment. So there's a few to choose from. They got different levels of tracking frequency and things like that. But I would say it's probably fair enough if you're thinking about big adventures and have a device that you really want to use in lots of other ways than just flying. But the bottom line is, all of these devices that I was showing earlier on, they all do tracking and they all send out an SOS message. And that is, 95, 99% maybe of what you'll ever need, or what you need them for. That if you run into trouble, or if you are with someone who run into trouble, that's what it's for. So if I wouldn't obsess about buying the simplest, cheapest one and maybe worried like, oh, would I need some more features or options? Like, tracking and an SOS message is really what you want. Anything else is a nice to have bonus, but I've used my Inreach with the custom messages, I think 2 or 3 times, and my wife actually never bothered to reply to me anyway. So there you go. It's not that useful, I think. Last but not least, I think if you want to take one message from this whole slightly rambly chat, if you want to use it, or if you want to buy one, use it, be smart about it, learn how to use it, and have a system. It's if you spend all the money, it's not much point not using it properly and not serving its function. So make sure that it's basically part of your pre-flight check, and it's just part of the whole routine of your flying. And just don't be that one person who's got all the fancy kit but doesn't actually know how to use it. It's just a bit embarrassing. I hope some of that was helpful. I guess most of us have these trackers, so I think it maybe wasn't all that much of a discovery for most of us, but hopefully some of that maybe was useful. For any further reading, the first port of call would be definitely the websites of the manufacturers. They're reasonably good and reasonably clear on what the devices do. There's a couple of really good reviews and comparisons on XCMag and Cloudless Mayhem. Gavin really goes on about Inreaches being all of it, and Spots being a bit crap, possibly a little bit because he's sponsored by Garmin. But to be totally fair to him, he actually used the Inreach communication, which is something that the simple Spot doesn't do. He used it in a couple of very serious rescue operations. So, fair to him, some of the places where he's flying are probably next level extreme from anywhere in Scotland. So maybe that's why. But yeah, there's definitely much more detailed reading about all the nitty-gritty features and details of these devices. So I'll put this presentation later on Telegram so we can get these links to you. Yeah, thank you very much. That's all from me for tonight. If you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to take some.
Shemek, that was great. I think I fit into the category. I've got one and I rarely use it or test it or whatever. So some salutary information there, but no, I must get into the habit of getting it sorted. There were a few questions in the chat.
Okay, just let me have a look at it.
Someone's talking about Flarm. Well, that's not really a tracking system, is it?
Yeah, as I just saw the Warwick's comment about put the dinner on. Yeah, I wouldn't say it to my wife, and I am actually doing most of cooking these days at home anyway. So yes. Ben's, yeah, downloading maps to Earthmate. Yeah, a bit like a phone. So the Inreach comes with its own mapping application where you can have static maps that work without mobile reception. It's part of understanding your device. Like if you're setting up your Inreach, whichever type it is, it will tell you to download that app and download the maps and all that stuff. So it's part of it. And then, yeah, there was something about messages to Telegram groups. Now, I think that is possible in some ways. If anyone is interested more in that, maybe ping a message to Tim Pentreath. He seems to be the kind of master of all this sort of Telegram linking to lots of other media. He's really good at that. I think I looked at it at one point a little bit together with Graham Saunders, and I forgot who else there was. Someone who's quite was maybe was it Dom? Someone who's quite nifty with computers actually. Yeah, it kind of worked, but it wasn't really that good. You know, to me, the key thing is that I just put my tracking on and it's fire and forget, and someone sees it. For XDeFine, there is an app you can get on, at least on Android. So, you know, if you would be able to see Telegram, you will see XDeFine as well. So it's kind of the same.
Shemek, sorry, Shemek, do you want to stop screen sharing so we can
oh yes,
see everyone?
All right, fair enough. Good point. But if Paul gets hurt and you can't land near him, can you press SOS? Yeah, well, I don't know. I think the thing is, you would definitely press SOS and people will see you. But you know, they would see that you're still moving. I think if you press SOS, and again, you can read all about it on the Inreach website or Spot website. They would try to call you to make sure you just didn't sat on it. If you don't pick it up or something, you know, they won't assume it was a mistake. They will call the police or 112 or whatever. You know, they will send someone out. So I guess if you see your mate being hurt, you can't land next to him. Well, what I would do, I would probably press SOS, and then I would try to land somewhere nearby, because that at least buys you some time. Now, how much your mate is hurt? Is he hurt? It's a bit tricky to see from high up sometimes. So it's, you know, it's a hypothetical situation. But yeah, end of the day, unless you press SOS and chuck your Inreach at your mate with a broken leg, you know, the signal will be following. They will be following your signal with you. So there you go. Yeah, there is something about building a track log. I think you can do it if you download the pings. I mean, IGC file is a text file with a bit of coordinates in it. It wouldn't be accepted by XC League, I don't think. But if you really want to, you can get an IGC file from that. Yeah, custom messages cost money. So yeah, just as a quick overview. I mean, read the plan if you have a Inreach or a Spot. See what costs money. What Ben refers to here is that these I'm about to take off, I've landed safely messages. I think there's something like in your plan that you pay, you know, 15 quid a month for a year. I think you're allowed to have 100 or 200 or something, 100 messages, like these preset messages without paying anything extra. This is in your plan. But if you start sending custom messages, as in like, can you please put my dinner on, or miss you very much, things like that, that costs something like, you know, 20p a message. I think Ben had his Inreach set up originally that all the messages were sent out as custom. So he got hit with a bit of a bill in his first month, which was quite funny. But hey ho. Yeah, on XCFind, if you go to XCFind, oh, I forgot to actually put it in the links. Sorry about that. I'll put it just now in the chat, actually. So if you go to XCFind page, it's xcfind.paraglide.us. There you go. And on that website, on the bottom left, in that stripe on the left, is a non-clickable email address. I think Dave just doesn't want to get spam. It's davidrwheeler@gmail.com. He's just a guy, a bit of a IT geek, I guess, who set up that website. And if you ask him to add you, you just have to send him your the link to your Inreach or Spot website. Your kind of your private tracking site that you get with this device, and that's it. I think he asks for something like a donation because he's doing it for free, but he's not going to ask you for money. So it's a nice thing to drop him a few quid a year over PayPal or something like that, because he's doing a massive service to the whole community.
Shemek, can I just interject for a second? The SHPF make an annual donation to XCFind on behalf of SHPF members, which is not to say, I'm not saying don't give money to XCFind, because I agree with you. I think it's amazing what he does, and is bung him some money. But just for SHPF members, just be aware that a little bit of your subscription does go to XCFind every year to support that website.
Yeah, I forgot about it, but yeah, it's a very good point, Warwick. I mean, we kind of take it for granted, but that website really, really saves a lot of faff at the end of a good day when we're trying to see where everyone is, where our mates flew it, and things like that. So it's it's a great resource. Do you need to subscribe to Inreach for a minimum period of time? I don't remember. I don't think so. I think you can pretty much cancel whenever you want. Inreach very nicely during the pandemic, they offered to suspend your payments. I don't remember exactly how it worked out. Sam Smith knows more about it because he did it. I think Steve did it as well. So it saved you a few bucks. And I think last month Inreach actually, they sent me an email saying they will be charging less every month from now on for a while, again because of pandemic, I think. So they're reasonably flexible when it comes to different plans. 10-minute tracking intervals in Scotland. Yeah. Well, I think the problem with Kiwi, as far as I read about it, for everyone who maybe haven't heard about it, Kiwi was a guy who was missing for a month in the Rockies, in the Sun Valley, who, well, unfortunately had an accident and passed away. But even though he had an Inreach with him, it still took a month to actually find him. Again, the Rockies and Sun Valley, I think it's a slightly different terrain to Scotland, but not to say that people go missing in Scotland and not being found for years as well. That still happens. I would say that from what I've heard, the main issue with Kiwi was that he wasn't really near his spot, or his spot stopped, or Inreach stopped transmitting when he was still in the air or something like that. So I think that was the main issue. Warwick?
Yeah. Let me just interject again. Kiwi hit the ground at terminal velocity because his glider had unzipped itself. And I think the general consensus is that his Inreach was smashed beyond, it stopped functioning the second he hit the ground.
Yeah.
So the last point that it transmitted was quite a few minutes before he hit the ground. So there's two things. One is, I think it's extremely unusual and unlikely that we will hit the ground at terminal velocity. That's an exceptional paragliding accident. And yeah, so I mean, for most of us, the tracker would continue to transmit our location after we hit the ground.
Yeah, and I guess if you hit it at terminal velocity, you're not really bothered when you're going to be found anyway. So
Yeah.
Not going to do it again.
Yeah, you're not going to do it again. Yeah, I mean, to be totally honest with you, I think I have mine at 20 minutes at the moment. It really depends. As Warwick said, it's very, very unlikely that your spot would stop working once you've had an accident. It's pretty sturdy. Like, it's just a pretty chunky rubberized piece of equipment, so you'd have to hit it really hard for it to actually break it. So yeah, 5-10 minutes. I don't think it makes so much of a difference, to be totally honest. I'm not too bothered about it, at least. Tosh mentioned here that I guess it's a really good point, actually. We are pretty lucky in this country with quite a few things, like NHS and other things, but search and rescue is another. It's not usual around the world that you just call 112 or 997 and they're going to send a helicopter for you. There are countries that it definitely will not happen. There are countries, well, that might happen, and then they'll give you a 50 grand bill for that helicopter ride. So I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe France will rescue you free. But there will be places in Europe that you really should have a search and rescue cover on your insurance that will, like, being found is one thing, but you should also consider that the helicopter ride might actually cost you a lot of money. So depending where you're going to fly, you should have a think about it and understand how these things work locally. The global rescue is something that I think Inreach switched to automatically last year, actually. So I haven't signed up for it specifically in terms of insurance, but I believe it's actually going to be a bit cheaper now if you have an Inreach or something like that. So again, in the UK context, I don't have to worry about it. But if I'm going abroad, I would always check what my insurance will do in case I have to use it. Because it's fair enough, break a leg, get saved, but you don't want to take a mortgage out to pay for the helicopter ride after that.
Shemek, Simon Cocker's asked, can phone GPS technology not do the same?
No, is the quick answer. Sorry, Simon, I missed your question. Sorry about that. Well, you cannot do the same. The main thing about the satellite messenger or satellite tracker is that it sends everything via satellite, so it doesn't use the GSM network at all. So I guess you can have these satellite connection boxes, and maybe someone would well, probably if you look hard enough, there will be an app that actually gets you connected through the box and pings your tracking, like on WhatsApp, basically. All these kind of, put the WhatsApp in the stalking mode and all that stuff. I don't know how reliable that would be. You would also pay for this this satellite message box. You know, they're not free. They cost money to send all the messages. So I mean, my answer is, you can't do it with just your phone. If you have the satellite message box, there's probably a way of doing it, but then you have a phone that has to connect to it and then has to send something. It also costs money. I would say you might just as well spend a bit more for the device and have something that does the job, even if you smash your phone, even if your phone runs out of battery and things like that. Again, it's just about reliability, I think. Yeah.
And
Did I-
another one, Dan Van Alten asked, silly question, why is the last track point on XC Find labeled 1?
Oh, no one knows that. It's like, why is programming in Python starting from 0, not 1? No one knows that.
Yeah.
Pain. It's a pain. Yes, it's very unintuitive, but it's just what it is. Sergio was asking, do you track points in every flight, even for a soaring session Dan Gavel? Definitely, mainly for all my buddies to see how many beats I've done. So definitely yes. But yeah, seriously, I do track my points. Again, it's part of my system. I might have forgotten it once or twice, but typically I would always fly with tracking. You know, I estimated that if you fly what I fly these days, which is like, you know, well, non-pandemic, maybe like 60, 70 hours a year or something. And if you track at 20-minute intervals, all the tracking points that you have are within your subscription costs, so you don't pay anything extra. And even if you run into extra costs, like the tracking point costs are minuscule, they're just a couple of p per track or something. So it's not going to break your bank. Yeah, well, exactly. That's Warwick's answer to it. Yeah, Gavin McClurg. He's sponsored by Garmin, but he has some really good stuff on his website. So definitely, if you want more details on that, I'll refer you to that. It's really good. All right. Okay.
Good. Well,
it's interesting. Yeah. Sorry, Mike.
I was just going to say that's coming up to 9 o'clock now. So
okay.
Last chance for any other questions to Shemek or even Warwick.
Yeah, I actually just want to mention again the transfer of messages to Telegram. I'm a bit disappointed that never really took off. I know that you can go and see everybody's flights and where they are on XC Find, but it was really useful having a very short text, just seeing when people have landed. Because I don't go to XC Find to search through, to look at individual people. Well, I sometimes do, but I would only go there if I know that they'd landed, if I wanted to know where they are. And with the Telegram, it tells you. It basically is just a message saying I've landed, and that's really useful. And the other thing, the other way around, is that when you've landed and you sent a message, sometimes you're not in phone reception, but it will continue to send something until eventually it's able to send a message which you don't know, which will then come up on Telegram. And I've always wondered why nobody really likes this idea. It's a secondary safety mechanism, and it's just a text message that goes out from, in my case, my spot. But the only way it was ever going to work was if everybody else signed up to it, which nobody did. So it's a bit of a shame. Graham,
are you talking about, just for clarity, are you talking about Tim Pentreath's system? Is that what you're referring to?
What system?
Well, Tim Pentreath set up.
I think that was it. It was just simply it's just the spot, and I think Inreach as well, messages would be ported straight to Telegram, but it had to be a separate Telegram group.
Yeah, well, I mean, Shemek, do you mind if I
go on.
So this whole subject was the cause of quite a lot of debate amongst a relatively small group of people, including Tim Pentreath. I think 2 years ago, because Tim came up for a few days in the spring and was sort of surprised to discover that Scottish pilots were not using his, I can't remember what it's called, it's XC Aero or XT Aero or something like that.
No, that was something different. This was called Scott Plot something or other.
Okay, all right. Well, in that case, I don't know what you're referring to, but I mean, it may be that what I was about to say is relevant, is still relevant. I personally, and I think a few other people felt the same way, were sort of quite resistant to Tim's system, not because it's a bad system. It's not a bad system. I think it's a perfectly good system, but because the Scottish XC flying community were all, of a mind and well trained in using the system that we did use, which was a sort of combination of XC Find and Telegram. And I think we all felt comfortable that if a pilot got into trouble, we would know about it quite quickly and be able to help them as best we could. And the concern was that if we tried to get the whole community to switch en masse to a completely new system, which although has got its merits, is actually also quite complex, that it would just become a stramash and potentially be dangerous.
Yeah, you're talking about an entirely different system, actually. The guy who was developing was called Alistair. I think Alistair Pandalus, maybe.
Yeah, that was actually.
Yeah, it's not an entirely different system. It's just another Telegram group. That's all.
So actually, yeah. Now.
I wasn't even aware of that.
No. Okay, so
I think it worked on IFT or something, didn't it? And I think they changed the rules for IFT, is it, or if this then that, or whatever the acronym is for the bit of coding, which would so you could set up an email that would ping when you press the button, and that email would then be forwarded automatically to the Telegram group without you having to be in Signal, so that anyone that was doing retrieves and things could forward it onto the retrieve group or whatever, so I think it was the IFT programming rules or access rules for Google that changed, Graham, I think.
Okay.
I think you're right, Tim, actually. That said, it's probably worth looking at it if someone's a bit of a IT geek. Yeah, I remember it now, because there was Alistair and Graham and myself actually who were like kind of experimenting in that group for a little bit. It never totally worked for me for some reason, but I think Alistair was just kind of working out with this IFFT, which is if this then that thing. I mean, if some people are interested, having a separate Telegram group, which is basically just a separate group that you can mute so it doesn't ping all the time, but it's just a dumping of I'm about to take off, I've landed safe, or just I've landed safe, see who pinged the landed safe message. It doesn't cost anything. If anyone's a bit of a IFTTT geek, go ahead, because that will be something that doesn't involve anything from the pilot. Actually, it's none of the Tim Pentreath kind of geekery that you have to do. It was totally passive. So it might be a nice extra thing to have, basically.
I suppose it's a conversation for another day probably, but I guess my concern about all of these great technological solutions is that if all of our attention becomes diluted between 3, 4, 5 different systems, then there's a risk that someone falls between the gaps, and
that's the thing, is it's not a different system. It's literally just another Telegram group. That's all that so it's just one thing that you can look up when you're looking at the Telegram retrieve group or whatever. You can look at this one as well, and it's just simply the messages that are peeled off from your spot or whatever that go to XC plot or whatever it is. It just goes to a Telegram group as well, so you can just see in text when people have landed.
You can see that I mean, Graham, sorry, I don't want to get into a debate with you, but that XE Find already does that. You can, the preset message that I'm about to launch and I have landed safely already.
I realise that, but you end up having to look for particular people, whereas it's the other way around here. You know, you're not looking for somebody. It tells you who's landed. You don't have to look for anybody. It's just a listing of people people who've landed. So it's just that. It's simply that. Nothing. And also the other thing is I find looking on XE Find on my small phone screen quite tricky sometimes.
Yeah, that's true. That is true.
And and if you're just getting a text message to say, "Here, I've just landed," then that's great, because if you're a retrieve for one particular person, that's what you'd be looking out for.
I think it would be really cool for us to have a sort of Scotland-wide conversation about what's the best sort of technological way for us to track our cross-country flights at some point, but not just as we're about to embark on a spring season. That's my feeling. Maybe do it over a winter once, just for fun.
I have one other comment actually on Spot. I've been a little bit dissatisfied, with the Spot customer service of late. In particular, their sort of sudden price rises every now and again. And I'd just like to say that what you can do is give them a call and say, "I don't like this. I'm thinking of leaving," and they will automatically reduce the price.
Yeah, they tried it with me as well, actually, but I had my Inreach by then anyway. So, yeah.
Good. Anything else, anyone? Last call. Brilliant.
The jus is a little bit more cheap. It's not too bad though.
So thank you very much indeed, everyone.
Just one last thing just before we end.
Someone's unmuted.
Just one more thing that Shemak actually told me before I bought mine is about the price matching on Inreach. So if you haven't got an Inreach and you're thinking about buying one, so you've got a Spot and you're thinking about buying an Inreach, have a look at the you know what I'm going to say, don't you, Shemak? Have a look at the price matching, because I didn't know about this. And I got someone that must have been drunk or on drugs or something like that, or just maybe having a good day and thinking, I don't really like this company that I'm working for. And I got a really good deal. I think I ended up paying about 170 quid for my Inreach. And I didn't actually think it was going to work when it arrived, but it's sure enough the real thing. But just if you're thinking about buying Inreach and you haven't got one, think about price matching, because it's well worth it.
You have to have Ben's luck in life to do that as well. But,
Just one comment on the live track 24, if I may. With people getting their Spot or Inreach registered with that, have you got any way of turning off on a day? Say you decide to go hill walking or canoeing or sailing or something, or you may not want to use your Inreach or Spot or have it tracked. Is there any way to turn that off so you're not producing a track log?
Yeah, you can turn tracking off.
yeah, you can hide your link, the kind of the address from which your track is taken onto XE Find. You can make it non-public if you want to. But
just on a day, one day at a time kind of thing.
Yeah, you can do it, but I mean, not sure why you would do it, but you can do it.
Well, if you're maybe doing another sport where you didn't want to use it as a rescue thing, you were just using it as tracking for some reason.
Yeah, I mean, people take it. You can see, like, Cathal and myself as well, taking it regularly for cross country ski touring and things like that. So
I suppose, yeah, you would. Other thing,
I don't think I was like calling out for having a hiking track log on XE Find. It's totally fine.
Yeah.
Alistair, sorry, on my spot, I think I can just press a button and it turns off tracking.
Oh well, other one that I use is Live Track 24. Now that I think does the same as XC Find, but you have to get your buddies to accept you as a friend. But you can in Live Track 24, it does I think the same as XC Find, and you can use that just in exactly the same way. But you need to actually get your buddies and put them in as friends. And when you open it up, open your friends, and it's really awkward using it on a mobile because the text buttons are all tiny wee kind of thing. But it certainly works quite well.
Live Track is a GSM, it's a mobile thing as well.
Yeah.
So if you're out of reception, no one will find you.
Yeah, but the XC Find will be the same.
No.
I'm trying to use it on my phone to see other people. If I'm out in the field somewhere, I would still need to have a mobile signal to use XC Find to find other.
Yeah, to use XC Find, but your spot or Inreach signal will go to XC Find wherever. Whereas Live Track, if you're out of mobile reception, will not produce a track. That's the main difference.
Good point. That's the answer.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, just to very quickly touch on the Flarm. Flarm is something totally different. Flarm only is looking live. Is your vector of your velocity, is it about to hit another plane around you or another aircraft around you? That's it. It doesn't produce any track. It produces, I think it tracks some of the transponders live, but it doesn't track as Inreach or Spot. So it's a totally
no. I'll not need to have a wee look at the differences between Live Track 24 and XC Find, but I'm certainly looking at getting a Spot anyway once we get back to doing something constructive. Thanks.
Right. Oh, if Fred's got something to say.
Just a quick one. Alistair, I know somebody with a Spot that they don't want, and it's brand new and in its box. So I'll be in touch on that. Send you a message. What all I was going to say though was, Shamik's point of practicing putting your Inreach on. I've just bought one for this reason actually. If you look over the back of most hills that we fly, the Moorfoots or something, or bits of Broughton, or loads of hills in the borders, which you normally think of as fairly innocuous. Once you're farther than shouting distance from a road and you haven't got a mobile signal, even in these kind of safe places we fly, you're still lost. You've only got to be 3 fields away with a broken leg, and it wouldn't have to be handy to get rescued. So it's not just about the big wonderful things that you might do up in the Highlands or whatever. It is actually a kind of a handy thing to think about more locally, and I'm going to set mine up sometime soon. Cheers.
Great. Last chance. Anyone else? Going, gone. Shemek, that was brilliant, really constructive, a lot of positive chat there and interesting chat. So thanks so much. And Warwick, thanks for inspiring us all. And yeah, as Warwick says, looking forward to getting out onto those hills and seeing everyone sometime soon. All the best. Bye.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Thanks, Warwick and Chair. Excellent. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye bye.
Cheers, guys. Thanks very much.
Sounds like there's a lot going on that might not come together.
Going. It's Yoda sitting in a corner. You're backlit there, Graham. You're supposed to be a photographer.